My name is Dr. Ruth Mary Allen, and this is my podcast, Brain Health Unchaining Your Pain. Our world has become a minefield for our children to get the best out of their brain and whole body health, which is why I founded the Wellbeing Warrior Academy to help them navigate this minefield effectively. Right now, if you go to www.wellbeingwarrioracademy.com and use the code podcast10, you can get 10% off all programs. That's www.wellbeingwarrioracademy.com and use the code podcast10 at checkout. Now, let's get back to this week's episode of Brain Health Unchaining Your Pain. Welcome to the show, Brain Health Unchaining Your Pain. I am really looking forward to this conversation with the amazing Dr. Sally Moorcroft. Welcome to the show, Sally.
Hi, well, thank you. Thanks for inviting me to come on.
Oh, no, you're most welcome. I really appreciate you giving up your time because I know it is very precious given the busy schedule that you have. So for those that don't know, Dr. Sally Moorcroft is an award-winning integrative and functional medicine doctor. She has special interests in women's health, psychology and the gut microbiome, and in particular menopause, perimenopause, yay, that's what I'm in, and PCOS and endometriosis. She writes for national publications, lectures and teaches nationally on integrative and functional medicine, and she's the co-founder of the Northern Centre of Integrative and Functional Medicine in Lincolnshire. She also has Chapel Yard Organics in Holt, Norfolk, and Dr. Sally's Botanical Herbal Teas and Tonics. Wow, a very busy lady, and I'm so excited. I'm so excited to talk about this because it's a topic, addressing female health is something that is really important, and I don't think it gets enough airtime. So I'm really looking forward to diving into this conversation, not only for myself personally, but for all of the Santa sisters out there who wanted to hear about female hormones, and all of the ladies out there that are going through perimenopause or menopause and struggling with brain fog or anything else. So before we start, I'd love to know what you are passionate about in life right now.
Okay, I'm kind of excited because I'm just about to move house, and that's exciting because I'm going to get quite a big garden. So I'm currently sort of planning a vegetable garden and buying raspberry canes, and I haven't had a garden for the last 6 years, really, very small one. So I'm just very excited to be having a garden again and getting in the greenhouse and growing some food.
So do you know, I love that. And I know when I was a kid that we used to grow loads of stuff in our garden because it was quite big. And I think it's so important to have that opportunity to do it if you can, obviously, and grow your own vegetables, particularly given the importance of trying to move towards organic rather than the pesticide-infused vegetables that you typically get in the supermarkets.
Yeah, and the taste. I just can't wait those fresh tomatoes at the greenhouse.
Yeah, I agree. And what I really love doing with my daughter Lily is going foraging because you just get amazing flavours, don't you, that you would just not get in the traditional fruit and veg that you would buy in the supermarket. So it's super exciting. So I think I would love to dive in to your story, if you will, that got you to becoming a functional medicine practitioner, because I know it's a rare thing currently in the UK, and in very much few and far between practitioners from functional medicine, and I think it's something that's so important because we have to take a really integrated approach to helping people heal their mind and body. So would you mind taking us on your journey for a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it started a long time ago. I think I come from a farming background. We're very foodie, and we always grew vegetables at home. So I had a very strong connection with food from all my childhood, really. And but that was just, I think that was just part of life. And then when I was 18, before I went to medical school, I went to live as a nanny in France. And I think that was actually a massive turning point for me, because I ended up just moving to live in the Drôme Provence, which is a really beautiful area, but also, again, very much into organic and biodynamic food. And there's a very big sort of holistic medicine kind of, what would you say? It's just very popular there. So
Mhm.
the family that I happened to move in with actually all they used homeopathy, they used herbal medicine. It was really part of just the culture there. You would go in the pharmacy, it would be half, say, herbal medicine, homeopathy. The pharmacists were all trained, the doctors are trained in France as well to use it. So I kind of spent a year living there. It sort of opened my eyes. Okay, there's a different model here, and it was really interesting to see that. So I just came back and I continued my studies, and I was really heading into sort of general practice. That was what I wanted to do. And then actually in some of the holidays I had from university, I travelled and went to India a few times. So I spent about 4 summers in India, and I ended
Wow.
up doing some studying of yoga and also Ayurvedic medicine. So I kind of got a bit of an interest in the traditional Indian Ayurvedic system. And then I did an elective in Australia, and I ended up in an Aboriginal health centre, which was
Oh my goodness.
bush. And so I was sort of looking at traditional bush medicines and art therapy. There was also a big art therapy centre for drug and alcohol rehab, because obviously that's a big problem with the Aboriginal community
Yeah.
right in the Northern Territory there. So it was a really holistic centre that I ended up with. So that sort of shaped me. I went back to uni, carried on, but I started doing all these things in my spare time. Like I started doing meditation classes, and I had some health problems myself. So I actually had acupuncture for
Mhm.
irritable bowel syndrome after traveling to India. So I ended up having some, different for myself. Really, we're exploring different options, and I think slowly over time, my interest grew, and then I can't remember where I worked in the NHS. I worked in general medicine, but I never really. I think I was always interested in looking for the root cause of ill health. I was always passionate about nutrition,
Mhm.
and also I think with my interest in gardening, I just got kind of drawn towards the medicinal plants as well. So I left and I went to Glasgow and did a 4-year herbal medicine degree, and that was back 20 years ago now. I finished,
Wow.
and then from there I actually just set up a clinic, and I've continually studied since then. So I started with the herbal medicine, but then I did a lot more nutritional training. Then I did medical acupuncture training, and I did a 5-year postgraduate in homeopathy in Bristol at the National Centre of Integrative Medicine there, which was really interesting. And then I did more training in sort of bioidentical hormone therapy, and then the functional medicine with the Institute of Functional Medicine. So I'm just finishing the certification for that. I've been doing that for quite a few years as well now, just working my way through their program, and it just kind of all fits together with that, really. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, I just think it's a fascinating. You can go on forever studying and looking at different ways of seeing the body. I did sort of extra training in traditional Chinese medicine, and I used that along. I was particularly always drawn towards sort of gynecology and women's health, and some of the traditional Chinese medicine herbs are really helpful, and the way they classify the body and the sort of diagnosis in TCM is really. I found that really helpful. I use that a
Mhm.
lot in practice for lots of different sort of gynae problems. And so it combines very well, I think, now with the functional medicine and all the more. I mean, now as a clinic, we're very focused on sort of the gut microbiome. We do a lot of in-depth testing of hormones and the genetics, like nutrigenomics type testing, really, where we're looking
Yeah.
at pathways. And so that's really good. And then I think it's nice to have that other sort of more holistic head on, which is more the traditional, like the Ayurvedic or the traditional Chinese medicine, where you have a slightly different way of looking at the body, but it's just complementary, I think.
Mm.
So it's kind of pulling them all together. I
Mm.
found over the years I've just amalgamate all of them into a very holistic system that just, depending on the person in front of you, you can just use the different tools. I just see I've got a big toolbox now, and the person sitting in front of me, I'll, think, okay, that system's going to be really helpful. Or, people often are drawn towards different systems themselves anyway. Some
Yeah.
people look at adventure, some people don't. Some people really want to get into food, and some people
Some
are
people
not.
like meditation and
Yeah, exactly. So, it's really nice to have a big toolbox that you can use to see things in many different ways, but they're all very complementary. I think have a really holistic view. So I think, I love having time with people to get to the root cause of problems and understanding where things have developed from in the first place, and just helping people to peel back those onion layers of, thinking, why did I end up where I am today? How are these things first started, and looking back, and then just slowly supporting. We're a very sort of supportive centre. All our practitioners are very good at kind of helping people to make changes, because it's often behavioural changes people need to make, or
yeah, and
there's
it
a
can
lot.
be really hard, can't it, making behavioural changes, particularly when that's been your neural network for like 20, 30, 50 years, for
Yeah,
somebody to say, no,
exactly.
that's not the right
Yeah,
pathway for you in your mind. You have to change it.
I
It's
know.
hard.
It's very hard. I did do the Hoffman process as well myself, and actually back in, I don't know, I think it's about 6 years ago now, which was a really thinking about neuroplasticity. That was
Yeah,
incredible, actually, how, to actually experience that, those changes happening. So I think that all this new work about neuroplasticity is so hopeful, isn't it? That people can
yeah.
change, that you can change those patterns and they're not set. And
Yeah, I
really
always
cool.
like to think of it like our autonomic response, which is in essence what our behaviours become, is an automatic response because it's become learned to the point that you don't have to think about it. It
Yeah,
first starts when we are walking
yeah,
and we stop ourselves from falling over and we put our hand out.
yes,
And I'm a former kayak instructor,
yeah.
and when you teach people kayaking, you have to retrain the brain to tell them not to put their hand out, but to actually use the paddle on the surface of the
Oh,
water.
interesting.
And you
Yeah,
might think, well, that's going to be really hard, but you can retrain the brain
yeah.
in 5 days
Wow.
to rewire to
Yeah,
a new automated response based on the new environment that they're
yeah.
in.
Brilliant.
And we don't think about that, from a neuroplasticity perspective, but we're
Yeah,
incredibly a- able to
yeah.
adapt
It's
to
true. Yeah,
changes to our environment
yeah,
super quick if
yeah.
we want to. So I think that
Exactly.
the key thing on the behavior issue, and I just find this all fascinating, is you have to have an emotional attachment to the
Yeah,
change of behavior that's
yeah,
better than the emotional attachment you have to the current one.
yeah,
Because if it feels like a pain rather than a gain, you're
yeah,
not going to adopt that new behavior.
yeah, yeah. It is, isn't it? I think it's so hopeful. I find it so kind of hopeful and optimistic, that it really gives people freedom, doesn't it? It's very empowering to know that. And I think some people don't realise how much you can change these. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I love the fact that you have built your toolbox up. So you've not just got a spanner in your toolbox, you've got a hammer and a chisel and a whole heap of other tools
Yeah,
that you can apply to this certain situation. And I
yeah,
think so often in traditional medicine, it's just a hammer
yeah,
applied to and a pretty large one
yeah,
to something that might need a little bit of chiseling.
yeah. It's true,
And I
isn't it?
think that's so important. That's why I think I super love functional medicine and taking an integrated approach, because everybody's different, like
Yeah,
you said, and people need a different pathway that's unique to them, that's going to help them get to where they want to go. And
yeah,
it's not necessarily going to be the same path that they're going to take, that another person's going to take.
yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think,
yeah.
I mean,
So I'd love to know for you, before we start talking about female hormones and everything else, is what does optimal brain health mean for you personally in the context of your life's journey?
I think it's all for me. It's It's a good question. When you asked me that, I thought, oh my gosh, it's so wide, isn't it? Because you can sort of think, okay, I probably personally, I've maybe had some anxiety. I've had sort of anxiety in the past. So for me, it's probably being able to keep grounded. I think because I know that over the years I've worked a lot on kind of connecting with my gut instinct and following that. And so actually, if I'm in a grounded place and not being anxious, then I know I make better decisions and everything flows better. And I think I've done a lot of work on myself as well, and I've got I'm quite a perfectionist sort of tendency, so I tend to be very over analytical perfectionist, kind of that kind of over analyzing. So that's my tendency, which has good points and bad points. But I think for me, being in balance is the key, because I don't want to lose that. It's good to be detail orientated, and I like that, but I have to be careful not to go down rabbit holes. So I think it's all about balance, and that's I guess I've spent a long time for myself just finding things that give me that. And for me, it's nature and gardening, and that's what really helps me. But it's different for everybody, isn't it? But
yeah, it is. And I really can relate to that, because I have a super anxious brain. I have an overactive basal ganglia, and it's really important for me to calm my brain down. And my brain's often whizzing. I have a very fast cerebellum, so my brain is whizzing at 100 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And if I can't down regulate myself from an anxiety perspective, I can't explain myself to other people, because I'm not slowing myself down enough. And I can get really, really agitated. I'm really angry quite quickly, because of that sort of anxiety amplification. And I never really, until I went on my own personal brain health journey, never really paid attention to my anxiety levels. Nature was my escape, but sometimes it's not always available. And you don't take the time to go and connect with it. And so your anxiety buckets fills and fills and fills until at some point it overflows.
Exactly. It's true, isn't it? It's definitely, it's having that awareness to know what you need, isn't it, to keep yourself topped up.
Yeah, and I can really relate to the grounding piece. I think we talked about this before before going on the show, is that for me it is literally grounding myself, like you would ground an antenna. Is I have to literally lie down on the ground to dissipate the negative energy, or lie on the sofa works. But I have to literally connect with something and then just relax. And I recently, last week, I went to Body Balance, which is kind of yoga tai chi thing. And the instructor at the end, she always does a meditation, guided meditation, and you lie on the ground. And every time, my mum was struggling with a house at the time, and every time I lie down on the ground, I end up having tears coming out of my eyes, because it kind of releases the anxiety or the tension that's in me. And I just find it wonderful, just find it brilliant that you can do that.
I get the same with sort of the mindfulness as well, which is a meditation, which is a really fantastic tool, isn't it? I know you've had someone else talk about that, but I mean, that's also one of my favourite things too. So.
Yeah, and I don't think people really, unless you're very well practiced with meditation, I think it's hard to acknowledge the power that meditation can actually have on you personally. But it's finding the right practice, meditation practice that works for you, because there's loads of different types. And that's key. And how you integrate your body into the practice of meditation as well is really important, because you can either just stay in your mind, or you can use your body and imagine, use the power of your imagination to imagine things moving out of into your body.
Exactly.
And I think that's really powerful as well.
Yeah.
So I'd love to dive into female hormones now, and the often discussed topic of ladies going into menopause, or perimenopause. Let's start there. Perimenopause, and what the typical challenges are that women experience when they go into perimenopause, and how we can take a more integrated approach to
Yeah.
addressing it, rather than, going straight for the a pill as,
Yeah.
something to be taken twice a day.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the changes often start early. I think that's the thing that's often difficult for women, because often the 40s is quite a stressful time anyway. So often women are juggling quite a few different things. You may have children, you may be very busy at work. So I think often those changes start happening and people are very unsure. They'll often come to me and say, I don't really know if it's work or stress, or is it my hormones? They're not quite sure. But it is on average about 8 years before menopause that things start to change. So it is early 40s when normally the hormones start to change.
Mm-hmm.
And the first sign that you often see is progesterone levels declining. And it is really it's quite heavily influenced by the amount of stress you are under as well. So if you're under a lot of stress and you have those kind of chronically elevated cortisol levels,
Mm-hmm.
you'll often see that has a negative effect on progesterone declining too. So you'll have a natural decline in progesterone, but that's enhanced if you're under stress. So the body, because it uses the same precursor, like cholesterol is the precursor that makes all the sex hormones and
Yeah.
cortisol. And if you're under stress, the body just prioritizes making cortisol. And so
And not anything else.
yeah, basically. And progesterone is the first one to suffer, really. And progesterones are a really lovely calming hormone. It helps, it's got a lot of really beneficial effects for the brain, and helps to effects on GABA. And it breaks some of the metabolites that it breaks down into, really have a lot of different calming effects in the brain. So when that starts to go, that's often when women start to feel more anxious, they have problems sleeping, you get more mood swings, more irritability, you'll often get worsening PMT symptoms.
Yeah.
So often those very early signs are to do with progesterone levels. And so often progesterone declines, and I'll see, definitely stress is a big factor in that. And then estrogen is very variable. There's different patterns that you'd see. I mean, it's so different for everybody, but you might start to see estrogen surging up and dropping. So that's kind of starts to happen. Or even another common pattern is estrogen dominant type pattern, which is where you get actually sort of higher levels of estrogen, and the ratio of estrogen to progesterone really starting to widen. So you'll see problems with quite high levels of estrogen and low levels of progesterone. That's quite a common pattern in perimenopause. And that's often because the clearance of estrogen in the body is influenced by lot of different factors. And if you're living a kind of inflammatory lifestyle, you're eating, say, lots of carbohydrates and sugar, and you've got some insulin sensitivity issues, or you're holding a little bit of extra weight, that can all push estrogen up. If you've got gut dysbiosis, problems in the gut flora, that can affect how estrogen is metabolized and excreted out of the body. So it recycles estrogen. So another way that estrogen might be reabsorbed and also increased. So it's often to do if there's other kind of issues going on, like chronic inflammation and poor diet, you'll just see that estrogen levels are high. And you might get, then in that case, you might get fibroids, heavy bleeding as well, breast pain, and you do see all these kind of the emotional symptoms worsening as well.
Yeah.
So that's often an early sign that people will see, okay, is that just normal? Like my periods are getting heavier, and I'm getting fibroids, and I'm getting breast lumps and cysts, and I'm getting more PMT and mood swings, and I can't sleep, and some early night flushes. Like that, it's common, but it doesn't need to be. Actually, that pattern can be balanced out. That there's lots you can do to help to balance that. So that's often what people experience first, and then as you get closer to your 51 is the average age for menopause. As you get closer to that, you'll often see then estrogen surging very high and then dropping. So that's when you really start the roller coaster. So some poor women, I mean, people really often feel like they're going a bit mad, like because your hormones are so out of kilter. You can't control.
And it's a wave, isn't it? So you're never on, like you say, it's a roller coaster. You're never on one
Roller.
even keel all the time.
And then often you might see like hormonal migraines. With particularly if people are sensitive to these changes, you can really see things like migraines, really severe mood swings, low mood, anxiety, and that's happening. And you'll see when estrogen goes high, they might have a bleed, they might be experiencing breast tenderness, and then it'll drop right down, and then you're probably more likely to be getting hot flushes or feeling achy or worsening anxiety. So it can become this, it's not, but for some women it's really tricky time. I think sometimes perimenopause is worse than actually when everything's just started to flatline and balance out. But depending on how sensitive you are to these fluctuations, really. So you'll see that, and then say if say average age is 51 for menopause, then obviously at some point estrogen just drops off, and it can can get odd surges even to like mid 50s. You can get these odd surges of estrogen coming up, which people might experience as a bit of a bleed, or you might go 11 months without a bleed, and then suddenly one happens.
And then suddenly get something.
But then say you'll get to the point where your estrogen levels have really sort of started to flatline. And once again, the amount of background stress has a huge impact. So if you've had high levels of background stress and you've had those high cortisol levels, then you're probably going to have less estrogen as a kind of baseline. So
because the cortisol will be prioritizing everything else.
So I don't know, the two hormones that are the sort of balance each other in the stress response are cortisol and DHEA. So if you're kind of spiking cortisol all the time, the DHEA is trying to protect you against that. It's your adrenal glands are going to be pumping out the DHEA, and eventually over time you'll see that kind of becomes quite low, and you might end up with very low levels of DHEA, and that's our precursor for estrogen production. So if that happens,
in that instance on the adrenal glands, you're kind of wearing them out, aren't you? Because they're kind of had this excessive stress. Exactly. So you've got to a point where your adrenal glands, which is responsible for managing your stress levels that are raised from the hypothalamus. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's your hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal axis, or your HPA axis, and your adrenals are an essential part of that. Exactly. It's when you wear your adrenals out, you kind of make your situation worse because your body has just got tired of producing DHEA.
Exactly. It's basically got flat battery. You just sort of, and it stops responding after a while. That's what happened. After lots of stimulation, it just kind of goes, I'm not doing it anymore.
Done.
I'm done. Yeah, exactly. So, you'll just see like the DHEA might start to go. You'll often see that on blood tests that it can be low. And you might see estrogen drop very low again. So commonly in women who've had a lot of stress, I might see DHEA low, estrogen low, progesterone low, and testosterone low. You might see all of them really low. And estrogen, obviously we know estrogen's so important for brain function. Without estrogen, so much, it's absolutely vital, isn't it? So, that's often when women start to get more cognitive problems. So, brain fog, problems with memory, forgetting things all the time. It can also, depression can be associated with low estrogen. So in cognitive function, focus, concentration, all of these things. So that's often when women really start to struggle with brain function, is when estrogen's very low. And they might obviously be having those other symptoms like hot flushes, or feel achy, fatigue, sometimes vaginal dryness. You can see all of these changes, skin changes with collagen. So it depends really on how much that estrogen drops. What's your baseline? So if your adrenals are healthy, your adrenals do take over a little bit. So if you've got healthy adrenals, they will take over a bit, and that's kind of that's what you want to see, that they can do that. But for some women, that the levels can baseline very low, and so so really supporting. I'd say the key thing is the stress. It makes such a big difference. So
I totally agree.
The more rough time you're going to have.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because I'm in the perimenopause phase, and I notice that when I am stressed, my symptoms are more pronounced
Yes.
than when I'm in a calm state of mind, and it's this underlying stress level, isn't it, that sets the level of pain for me anyway, that I may have going into my period.
Yes.
It seems, I mean, I don't have hardly any pain, fortunately, for me personally, because I think I've done as much as I can in the context of my gut health and my nutrition, and everything else associated with that, and the exercise and so on. But I certainly notice that when I'm stressed, things are much harder in the context of that phase of the cycle.
Yeah.
Whenever it happens.
Yeah. And even actually surprisingly, things like hot flushes, if you actually look at, so hot flushes, you need lower estrogen, but you also have, the way that the hot flush kind of occurs is two things. It's having a low level of estrogen, then plus the adrenaline surge, because it's actually stress and anxiety will trigger flushes. So, actually reducing anxiety and stress will help with hot flushes as well. There's some good evidence to support that. Things like CBT can be helpful for that. So, it does have a massive impact. But like you say, it's all the other things as well. Nutrition, your gut health, all of that has a massive impact too. So
yeah, I'd love to dive into that aspect of it now, because I don't think people, the average female population, realise how much control we have over the symptoms we experience, either during our period phase of life, including when we're young, and PCOS, and I'd love to talk about that for a little bit if we can, and also as we go into perimenopause and menopause. Would you mind kind of, if we start with the gut, because everything starts in the gut, what we need to do more of that's within our control to help balance our gut microbiome?
So there's probably two things, isn't there? There's the food that you're eating, and then there's your, again, the sort of stress levels. So I think, often people focus a lot on the food that they're eating, and not so much on their emotional state. So I'll often see people working so hard on the clean diet and eating really well, but also eating when they're very stressed, and eating so quickly, and gobbling it all up really, so you do need to do the two together. So it's obviously with the gut, I mean, it's got so many neurons in, hasn't it? Obviously this direct impact with the brain. So in terms of brain health, it's we call it the second brain, don't we? So
we do,
it's important for that. But in terms of hormones, it's it's got lots of different key kind of actions really. So as well as all those beneficial bacteria, they helping with absorbing nutrients and vitamins and minerals from your food. They're obviously important for the inflammation response and your immune response. And inflammation in the body can trigger cortisol, again having an effect on all the hormones through that pathway, and also estrogen. So it has a massive impact. So there's something called the estrobolome, which is like the bacteria in the gut that affect the estrogen metabolism.
Okay.
So, and that's quite a really key, what's the word? It's kind of the focus of when you're looking at sort of hormone health and you're looking at the gut, you'll often be looking at, okay, for example, do you have bacteria which raise beta glucuronidase, which is kind of one of the pathways which influences estrogen metabolism. So you'll be looking at the type of gut bacteria in there. So some of the beneficial bacteria can help to protect, and some of the more pathogenic bacteria might stop you from excreting estrogen. They might cause you to actually reabsorb more estrogen. So they can have a huge impact on your estrogen levels. So that's a massive part of thing that we look at the clinic. If we've seen people with endometriosis, for example, you'll
Mhm.
often do a really deep dive into that. You can often see that there are problems with the gut flora.
Yeah.
So you're looking for markers that relate to inflammation often, or you might be looking for signs of sort of leaky gut, which is obviously
Yeah.
where the lining of the gut becomes more permeable, and in that instance, you start to reabsorb proteins and sort of toxic compounds that can trigger off inflammation in the body or autoimmune conditions as well. So, I also work a lot with women with thyroid problems, and you might
Yeah.
see that kind of going on behind the scenes in some autoimmune conditions, and even there's theories that endometriosis is linked to that as well. So like the lining of the gut and the gut barrier, we can look for markers of that on stool tests, and we can influence that a lot with the food that you're eating and the what you're doing with your diet and supplements, for example. So you're looking at the bacteria in the gut, you're looking at the lining of the gut. Is there sort of food sensitivities? Another thing that often happens in the gut, if you've got gut dysbiosis problems, is you might start to produce bacteria which can increase histamine in the body. And we know that estrogen also stimulates histamine receptors. So another thing that sometimes happens in the perimenopause, when estrogen being high, if
Spikes. Yeah.
there's a gut problem too, you'll see often high histamine. So people start to develop allergies. Sometimes you'll see more allergy symptoms like food sensitivity, skin rashes,
Mm.
urticaria, rhinitis. All those kind of allergy symptoms can get worse with the hormone changes. And they might be cyclical. So they might be like within the menstrual cycle, you see, well, actually allergies are worse at a particular point when the estrogen's high, basically.
Mhm.
You might see just overall allergies increasing. So that's often that's related to gut health as well. So
Wow, that is fascinating. I didn't know that.
yeah,
I didn't realise that histamine. There was an increase in histamine production as a result of estrogen, and the fact that your gut microbiota
yeah,
really influences that pathway.
yeah. So there are some bacteria in the gut which can increase histamine, and it depends on genetics. Some people have genetic susceptibility to it, and you can look at that. You can look at the little SNPs, the mutations that mean people are more sensitive to histamine. So yeah, but digestive problems, particularly and sometimes SIBO, things like that, can be connected to histamine, and it's often like a bit of a what would you call it? Just a perfect storm. Sometimes you'll see women with maybe the genetic susceptibility. They've got digestive issues which are causing histamine problems, and then you stick in a load of estrogen as
Yeah.
well, and it's like boom, everything. They just get a lot worse. So
And I think also, to relate to that, because obviously before I went on my brain health journey, I was constantly having uh, sinus infections, constantly. I still have a runny nose.
yes,
I've obviously got a sort of underlying allergy
yeah,
issue, but found out that I was not tolerant to gluten or
yeah,
dairy,
yeah,
and particularly eliminating dairy made a huge difference to my health state.
yes,
And actually, I literally was on antibiotics pretty much every year of my life, I would say, at
wow,
least once a year because of sinus issues,
yeah,
and from childhood. I have not touched antibiotics since, purely from eliminating dairy and gluten from my diet, and I don't eliminate it absolutely 100%. I do give myself permission to fail sometimes,
yeah,
but I have to accept the consequences.
yeah,
But I think it's fascinating, isn't it, that if we've got these underlying allergies that are
yeah,
associated with the foods that we consume, which, if I'd not been on the journey I've been on, I would not have known about it.
yeah,
And I would
definitely,
have been living with this chronic inflammation, I
Yeah.
would be in a much worse state. And, you know, since removing all of that, I've never really had mega period pain.
Yeah.
Since coming off, I never really had all of the aches and pains and stuff. So I've
Great.
been really fortunate. But you know, it's when you've got that chronic inflammation inside you because you've got all of these allergies that your body's trying to fight, including mold and dust
Yeah.
mites and everything else.
Yeah.
Your baseline is so much worse.
Yeah.
That as soon as you, like you say, you layer on the estrogen
Yeah.
fluctuation on top, it's like a volcano, isn't it? It's going to go.
And the thing is, it's a vicious cycle. The more inflammation, the more increase in estrogen. They kind of, actually it's a vicious cycle. So increasing inflammation in your body pushes estrogen up, then that pushes up inflammation. So, breaking that inflammatory cycle is so important and it often starts in the gut, so that's often why we start with the gut healing, because if you've got inflammation coming from the gut, you do get into this vicious cycle with it. And that's often what we're trying to do, is try and break that cycle of, find out where's the inflammation coming from. Very often the gut, okay, let's find out why, and then let's heal that, because then actually you start to go on a positive cycle. So
Yeah.
it's just got so many important functions.
Yeah. And I think for me, just from my personal journey, the three big protagonists: sugar,
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it?
dairy, and gluten.
Yeah. And sugar is just a huge one. And I think people often don't realize how such a simple change, like for example, with PMT, I see it all the time. Like PMT, the biggest change you can make is just cutting out sugar. And sometimes that's enough. Just
Yeah.
stop eating sugar, get your blood sugars nice and balanced, have a nice, steady balance of blood sugars through the day, and it makes a huge difference. Like sometimes that's it, completely stop PMT. I mean, it can be really dramatic. So that is
Yeah.
always the first thing. Is and obviously people have to work out, why am I eating so much sugar? There's often a lot of kind of backstory as to why you're doing that. Maybe you're really tired, you're using it to keep you awake. Maybe it's a comfort. Maybe it's a habit. Why are you? So it's often finding, okay, well, why is it the thing that you're going for? So, but I think if people first of all get awareness, okay, well, actually, it's my comfort, or actually, it's because I'm really tired, or that's the first thing often, isn't it? Just working out, like, why is sugar my thing that I'm having? Also, sometimes it's just literally because it's around you everywhere.
Yeah.
You do go out everywhere. It's always sugary carbohydrates everywhere you go, isn't it?
And it's really difficult to get away from it, isn't it? I mean, I know for me personally, I grew up with sugar my whole life. We used to have sugar. We always used to have puddings for tea. My dad was a real pudding, lover.
Yeah.
And when I went to the aiming clinics to get my brain assessed, I was, confirmed as being addicted to sugar, which I think many people are. But I literally, if you've got it in the house, I just want to eat it. So I have to go as 90% cocoa in chocolate, and get it, and literally not have it in the house, because if it's in the house, I will go find it and I will eat it. Particularly if it's biscuit orientated. So what I do and tend to do is, what can I have that is tasty, that feels like a sugar hit, but I know is going to be a slow release of energy and not going to give me a spiking in my glucose. So I love making like chocolate balls and stuff, because it's better than eating a big lump of sugar.
Yes.
The protein balls I'm talking about.
Exactly. It's often good, isn't it, to sort of wean onto the natural sugars first, I think. I mean, people are different. When I'm often talking to people, I'm like, what's your kind of character? Like, are you someone who wants to just go cold turkey? Right, that's it. I'm just chucking it all out there and I'm going for it. I'm going to go through the withdrawal for the next week and then I'm all done. Or are you someone who has to just really kind of gradually do it? Because, everybody's different, aren't they? And so I think sometimes if you're a kind of a cold turkey person, I think you just get rid of it from the house. You'll go through a week of massive craving, and then probably your taste bud, normally your taste buds change
Yeah, I
actually.
think it takes 6 days, doesn't it, for them to change. It's actually not
Yeah,
that long.
not long. It's that first week that's really tough. And then after that, often people will say, oh gosh, I went to actually eat it. It was horrible. It was so sweet. It was sickly, and I don't even like it anymore. So, I think even the most hardened sugar addict, your taste buds change. So I
Yeah,
think that there's something in that method. Or I would say, okay, if you don't want to do that, then actually just maybe get rid of all the processed sugar and just sort of wean yourself onto using maybe a bit of honey or have some dates or actually just try and go on to the natural sugars.
yeah,
And then at least you're getting some of the nutrients in there, aren't you? They're not just empty. It's not empty sugar.
empty carbs.
So you're getting a little bit of other nutrients in them. And then, it's probably just slowly portion size, reducing how much you have. But,
Yeah,
there's different ways of doing it, really. I mean, I think sometimes I like blueberries as well, because I think they're another good alternative. If you've got that craving, just having a good handful of blueberries, they're actually really low in sugar, but they taste quite sweet, and they're quite a nice, like raspberries and blueberries, I think are a
yeah,
good.
we love those at home. They're a go-to, God's candy, as it were.
Yeah, exactly. You feel like they are a bit sweet, but they're actually very low sugar. So, they're a great one. And like you say, the dark chocolate, just a small bit of dark chocolate is another good one, isn't it?
Yeah,
But I think, and I often say, if you really got that craving, then maybe just have a date. Just have one date, and just, that probably will do it if you're really feeling
yeah.
like, oh no, I just have to have to have some. So
Yeah, and I think it's not just the sugar, is it? Because we forget that it's the simple carbs as well. It's the white flour, the white rice, the white potatoes, all
yeah,
the equivalent of eating a bowl of sugar.
yes,
So it's
I
moving
know.
away from those very simple carbohydrates
Yeah,
into the more complex ones like brown rice, brown potato, brown pasta,
yeah.
and sweet potatoes and things like that. Vegetables with a lower glycemic index.
And often for women, because obviously the other thing that often happens around menopause is people start putting on weight. So the average woman puts a stone on over menopause.
Wow.
I know. I know it's really tough. I mean, almost everyone I see goes, "Oh my god, I'm just doing the same," and suddenly I've got this belly hanging over, and where did that come from? And but so the carbohydrate portion size, you just don't. You need about a third of what you were having before. So I think also in menopause, it's just cutting that carb portion down anyway. You've really got to make sure you're getting enough of the quality protein and your healthy fats, particularly if your brain function, you need all that omega-3. So
Yeah.
I think often there's, people have often been a bit scared of fats. So it's often okay talking to people about, no, don't be scared of fats. You need those fats.
You need
You
it
need,
to absorb your nutrients, your
yeah,
fat absorbable nutrients. So you
yeah,
need it. It's
yeah.
essential.
Exactly. So you need, a bit of olive oil, avocados, oily fish, nuts and seeds. So
Hmm.
it's really important to have those in as well, and they can help you to feel fuller. And then you maybe not going to get so much of the carb cravings as well. So I think if you're eating, if you're including those healthy fats and you're having good protein and good diversity of all the lovely rainbow vegetables, then hopefully you're not going to feel hungry. And actually, your blood sugars will be nice and steady, and you won't be having such cravings because of hunger. So I mean, I think the emotional side is another thing, and that's to look at, okay, normally we work with people to just substitute a different treat. You kind of just, it's really like, okay, what do I
Yeah.
do if I've had a bit of a rubbish day and, I'm feeling like I just need something as my little treat? Okay. And it's just changing that habit, isn't it? Okay, what can I do instead? Maybe I'll
Yeah.
have a bath instead. Maybe I'll go for a walk. Maybe I'll have a cup of tea. Like just find something else that becomes your treat and not
Yeah.
using the carbs
Yeah. And
instead.
it's quite hard, isn't it? Going back to the behavioural piece, is we have a cupboard in the kitchen that's got the treats in, and it's. I mean, unfortunately, most of them, not all of them, but most of them are healthy treats. But
Yeah,
it's changing how what you typically reach for, like you say,
yeah,
going for a walk when you get that feeling.
Yeah.
is reframing your brain and going, okay, there's the trigger. What am
Yeah.
I going to replace it with that's
Exactly.
going to be better for me? Or maybe I grab a nutritional bar and go for a walk at the same time, because that'll actually lower
Yeah.
the glucose spike that I will get if I tag on exercise at the same time as eating something.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, I think it's also doing, these things take time, don't they? And, obviously, I mean, I love, there's a term, I can't remember where it came. I don't know if it's from Buddhist philosophy, I can't exactly remember where I first heard it, but compassionate curiosity, which I really love that. So that kind of like looking at yourself with sort of compassion and thinking, oh, I wonder why I just did that.
Yeah,
But in a very non-judgmental way. And I think with sugar, it's a really good thing to do, just like, oh, I wonder why I just grabbed
yeah.
that brownie. I
Yeah,
wonder why.
I absolutely 100% agree. I call it get curious, not furious.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
And it's a journey of self-discovery, isn't it? It's going, oh, that, why was I angry, or why did I
yeah,
have a big mood? What's the root cause of that? And start kind
yeah,
of, like you say, peeling back the layers of the onion to
yeah,
try and get to the root
exactly.
cause of it.
I mean, I've done it myself. It was the funniest thing. It was, I think I was writing. I can't remember what I was writing. I was doing some work, writing some blogs, and I'd had a really stressful week, and I decided I really want a chocolate brownie. Like that's what I want. And I started eating this brownie, and I just thought, Sally, what are you doing? Why are you eating this brownie? And I just watched myself. I'm actually going to eat this brownie because I'm stressed, and it was the funniest thing because I just had this total conversation with myself, saying, "Why don't you just go and do some meditation? Or you could just go for a walk, or you could just eat the brownie." You could just having this conversation. I thought this is actually really funny. That I talk about it to people all day, and there I am sitting at my desk doing it too. But
But
I'm
it's
so
that awareness piece, though, isn't it? It's the awareness that you're doing something that isn't going to help you, and then once you're aware that you're doing, because you've got the knowledge and the awareness, you
yeah,
can choose to intervene or not.
yeah,
But for my clients, when we go through their behavioural stuff, is often it's about, particularly on the food and how
yeah,
your food affects your mood.
yeah,
Is the first thing is to get you the awareness of
yeah,
what
yeah,
you're eating
yeah,
influences your mood massively, and they've
yeah,
done loads of scientific studies on this. The
yeah,
number of proportion of fruit and vegetables you eat, up to 8,
yeah,
influences your level of happiness based
yeah,
on the neurotransmitters that are generated in your gut. So
exactly.
it's really important that we get that awareness first and foremost, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. It's
So I'd
great.
love to dive into PCOS now,
Yeah,
because I know it's like can be quite a big issue. Well, it is a big issue for those that have it, but
yeah,
it's on the rise as well, isn't it? PCOS in the
yeah. And I think that's another. It's a very complex hormone disorder. So it's a whole body issue. People think, okay, polycystic ovaries, but it's really complex and has a lot of effects on the rest of the body. And it's often called the diabetes of the ovaries. So it's really connected to insulin sensitivity. And so you'll see that as the root of the, the problem. There's often genetic predisposition to it, but there's the other big part of it is this insulin sensitivity that you often see. And then the other sort of root cause that you'll often see is to do with the adrenal glands. So you'll often see like issues with the adrenal glands. And some women, it's a bit of all of those. Some
Mhm.
women don't have so much issues with the insulin resistance, but they've got more of the adrenal. So you'll kind of see, there's these complex drivers which lead to the hormone changes. And so you'll often see, so you see abnormalities in the LH-FSH ratio, and then you often see, obviously, the high testosterone and the androgens, which drive the problems with your skin. So often women will get
Yeah,
acne, skin breakouts. They'll often get problems with hair growth. Um, Obviously, you've got the issues around fertility as well, so it can affect fertility. Women can go long periods of time without periods, so then you're kind of thinking, okay, there's no often affecting ovulation. And then you'll also often see a pattern of estrogen dominance and not enough progesterone as well. So you'll see there's quite a few different patterns which are driving it. And then some, like I say, sometimes these adrenal dysfunction patterns as well. So maybe high cortisol, low DHEA. So you'll often see all these patterns, and it can be very distressing. I mean, because particularly if women want to get pregnant, and there's the infertility associated with it, and also just the fact that periods become so irregular and it's hard to sort of manage your life when you don't know what's going on. So I mean, again, going back to that, a key thing is sugar, and there's lots you can do with diet. Again, with polycystic ovaries, there's often looking at insulin resistance, low GI diets, keeping blood sugars steady, and there's some supplements that can be helpful. Like there's some good studies on myo-inositol, which can be helpful, which can help to regulate blood sugars and reduce testosterone, and things like resveratrol, which is polyphenols, which can help reduce testosterone as well. So
I did not know that actually about resveratrol. Resveratrol, I don't know how to say it.
Yeah.
Because I know it helps with lung function, because it helps restore the ACE2, I think, from if you've got COVID, it's very helpful.
Yeah, it has lots of good benefits. So that can be helpful. So there's things that you can do to modify those pathways. So we often run like a Dutch test, which is a urine kind of hormone test, where it's a fabulous test that looks into a lot of detail at the pathways. So you might see women have problems with their testosterone pathways, and there's things you can do to modify those pathways. And so we're often working on the pathways or the genetics, which again, like I said, with these kind of nutrigenomics, where you're looking at the influence of the genes on these hormone pathways, and you can use nutrition and supplements to modify those. So there's a lot you can do to help to modify and change these pathways. So and then with herbs, there's you can sometimes use herbs like Vitex can be helpful. There's some research on peony and licorice being helpful, or sometimes I use the natural bioidentical progesterone as well, which can be helpful. There's lots of different options. I mean, it depends really. Some women are struggling with the weight side of things, which can happen in polycystic ovaries. Some people, there's more an adrenal picture. Then you might get different symptoms, maybe more fatigue, brain fog type issues. But there can be often a lot going on for these women. There's a lot of different symptoms. You do need to kind of look at it,
holistically.
Yeah, exactly. And sort of look at the different drivers for that woman, like what's going on in the background for her. But it's really important, because there's some research that can link polycystic ovaries increased risk of cardiovascular disease, and I think sometimes that's not really known about as well. That people. I mean, I had somebody like a couple of weeks ago who came with hair loss, so she was experiencing sort of male pattern hair loss, had a history of polycystic ovaries, and and there was a big family history of heart disease, and she didn't even know, like, well, okay, maybe I'm going to have to be a bit more careful, because actually there's some research linking that as well. So I think it's not very well understood. I think people are often just sent away, oh, you've got polycystic ovaries.
There's no recommended next steps. I think that's so sad, isn't it? Because I've clients who've got PCOS, and the traditional approach can be quite dismissive in terms of interventions you can make yourself personally, starting with your diet, and nutritional supplements to increase your baseline. So that and then once you increase your baseline, then you can look at all of the other factors, like you say, through a functional medicine practitioner like yourself, to make sure that you're optimized and that you're addressing all the different pathways that could be influencing your PCOS.
Exactly. And I'd say sort of sugar and reducing sugar and stress are probably the two first things to do. That would be the first things to look at.
And isn't it ironic that it's the sugar that we reach for typically when we're stressed?
I know.
So we're hitting ourselves, with a double whammy of pain by not addressing either of them.
Yeah, it's true, isn't it? It is true. Yeah.
And before, I know we're getting on to time, but I'd love to learn a bit more, if you will, about the adaptogenic herbs.
Yes.
I know nothing about this, so I'm super curious about what they are and how they can help people.
So they're fantastic. I mean, I love the adaptogenic herbs. There's nothing really like them, so I think that they're a very special category. And they have kind of 4 different characteristics, really. So they're said to be normalizing, they're nourishing, they're non-toxic, and they can be used sort of longer term. So they have this normalizing effect on the body, and that can be very helpful. So they're often modulators. So they can be really useful at sort of, particularly with hormones, at just modulating, but also often with inflammation and the immune system. So they'll often, like for example, some of the adaptogenic herbs that work on the immune system are really useful because they can modulate the immune system so that it's not over stimulated, for example, in autoimmune disease, but they can help to reduce infections. So because that's quite tricky sometimes. If someone's got lots of infections, you want to support the immune system, but you don't want to overstimulate it. And the immune system, if it gets dysregulated, can become either too reactive, so it's just reacting to everything, or it's not really functioning and you're just getting lots of infections. So
it's just worn out.
So the beauty of the adaptogens is they're often quite balancing in the body. So they'll often have an effect on the immune system. So that's an area that they're often really useful for. And they'll often have an effect on this HPA axis, our stress axis. And a lot of them work on the adrenal glands in a similar way. So they'll help to kind of normalize the adrenal glands. So they often help buffering the effects of stress. So they'll often normalize cortisol levels. So that's like ashwagandha, which is a really nice, really lovely herb for doing that. So that can help to normalize cortisol. It's a really lovely herb for helping to improve resistance to stress, and has a nice kind of modulating effect on the immune system. So if someone's burnt out and getting lots of infections, or their immune system's affected, it's a lovely herb because it not only helps to modulate and balance the HPA stress axis, but it will also help to modulate the immune system and support that too. That's why they're often so useful. So and then you've got lots of different types. So you've got some adaptogens which are more stimulating. So you've got like the ginseng, which is really good more in depression. If someone's really tired, it's a bit more stimulating and uplifting.
What about saffron? Because that's quite popular. Is that an adaptogen?
I don't know that, actually. I don't really use that much.
Oh, okay. That's okay.
Yeah. And with the ginsengs, they can often be too stimulating if someone's got a lot of anxiety, for example, because they're better in depression really, or sort of chronic fatigue. Mm-hmm. You've got ashwagandha, which is a more relaxing adaptogen. So that's very good where there's anxiety. That's really that tired but wired sort of state where someone's exhausted but very wired. That's the perfect one for that. Then you've got things like rhodiola, which is rhodiola is a lovely modulating one. I use that a lot. It's got some beneficial effects for brain function as well, can help with brain fog. So it's a really nice one for sort of burnout, or for if people are in the kind of stage 2, stage 3 stress response where they're getting really tired. So rhodiola is really nice. Then you've got some of the lesser known, like tulsi, which is a really nice Ayurvedic herb that I use. That's another one that's really nice, again, for reducing anxiety. I mean, you've got the medicinal mushrooms. They've often got some adaptogens as well. So they're often particularly focused on sort of immune function and
immune response.
So there's loads of different ones. I'd say it's best if you kind of tailor them, because they do all have slightly different. Some are a bit more focused on the stress response. Some are a bit more focused on the immune system. Some do both. And like I say, some are more stimulating. Some are more relaxing. So but they're really, really helpful, and I use them all the time. I mean, they're absolutely brilliant. When there's sort of stress in the background, they're so supportive of the adrenal glands. You would always want to put those into a treatment plan, because they're just going to help buffer the effects of the stress. And especially if somebody, because sometimes life's not perfect. You can't always get rid of stress, can you? You can help.
No.
You can support yourself, but sometimes you just know, well, actually, it's there, and at the moment, I can't change it immediately. And I think the adaptions then, there can be a bit of a lifeline to just help you buffer against the effects of it. If you know, well, actually, in a perfect world, I'd change things and do, but right at this moment, I can't do that. Then, I think that's when they're really helpful as well, because, not to use them as a crutch to continue with really unhealthy lifestyles, but, if you really thinking, well, sometimes circumstances take a while to change, don't they? So, that's going to be really helpful then.
I love that, because I've taken some of those rhodiola, I think, and ashwagandha to
Yeah.
help manage my stress levels. And I can't remember which one, but I took it through a product called Everyday Stress Relief.
Okay. Yeah.
And it was really to help turn off the constant whizzing that was going around in my head on the thoughts that I was having with, overactive basal ganglia. And I took it for probably a couple of months, and then I don't take it anymore because I don't need to.
Yes.
I've managed to sort myself out, as it were. And obviously everybody's different. But I find it, I'm not a specialist by any stretch of the imagination in nutritional medicine and herbs and stuff. That's why I find it so fascinating. That there's so much we can do beyond just the traditional go to the pharmacy. Go to the pharmacy with an F, which is your grocery, and eat vegetables. There's so much more beyond that that can really help us.
I mean, the other lovely herbs that I use a lot are the ones called the nervines, and I don't know if you've heard of those. So that's another category, which are the ones that work more on the nervous system, and some of them are very nourishing to the nervous system, and some have, again, sort of either relaxing or stimulating effects. So things like lemon balm, I don't know, that's a nice one. Valerian. My favourite, often I use, is like passion flower. So a lot of these have an effect on the GABA receptors in the brain, often, or they're increasing GABA. So a lot of them they're very relaxing and calming. So I use them a lot as well. So for helping people to sleep or with anxiety, some of these nervine herbs are really lovely because they're very gentle. You can have them in teas, or you can have them in tinctures or supplements, but they're just really nice and gentle and very calming, for helping people manage, particularly like perimenopause. I use a lot of the nervine herbs. They're really nice for anxiety and the mood swings and the PMT and things. So they can be really helpful.
That is absolutely fascinating. I know we could talk for hours. I know it's like a source of learning. It's amazing. Before we go, given the fact that this is really focused on female hormones and menopause, what one piece of advice would you give to, or a couple of pieces of advice, would you give to anyone who's really struggling going through menopause and not really sure which way to turn in the context of the symptoms they're experiencing?
Gosh, that's so many. I mean, I think in terms of things you can do yourself, I would say the things we've talked about today. So, doing those simple lifestyle things. So, getting rid of the sugar, alcohol, that's a big one.
Massive thing, agreed.
Sugar and the alcohol. And really taking a bit of time for yourself, because lots of women, that's kind of good to have just that focus of doing something that helps you to reduce your stress or feel in control of your life, and just having that time, whatever that is. I mean, I really
Put
don't.
yourself in for a massage.
Yeah. I mean, if that's your thing, I think people do, sometimes it's that, isn't it? Sometimes it's going for doing the exercise. Sometimes
plants
it's
and seeds in your garden.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter, does it? Playing a musical instrument, just something that's nourishing to you. I think that's the key thing, isn't it? So I would say they're probably the main things you can do yourself. I mean, food is massive, You can do so much with your nutrition, and I think maybe people don't always realise how much you can do. So, I mean, we obviously have a team of nutritional therapists, and I do think actually don't underestimate how much you can do by seeing somebody and actually really addressing your nutrition, because you think, okay, just eat a few more vegetables, but there's loads more you can put in, all lots of functional foods, and it can be really helpful to just work with somebody on a more one-to-one basis on food. So I think, that's kind of things that you can do. I'd say, there's so much information out there now. I think it can be a bit overwhelming, can't it, actually, looking at all the different pathways. But it's just finding the pathway that suits you. There's many different options. There's lots of tools. Like I say, my toolbox, I've got the nutrition, I've got the herbal medicine. I sometimes use the homeopathy, acupuncture. You've got your mind, body, yoga, loads of evidence that yoga can be helpful. So for not just the mood and stress reducing effects of yoga, but also on hot flushes and obviously sort of brain, flexibility and muscle strength. And, so, I think yoga is another area we haven't touched on, but that can have a huge benefit. And then, and maybe then look at maybe getting your hormones tested and seeing whether some bioidentical hormones are useful as well. So I would say if you're looking at the sort of HRT route, really stick with the bioidentical ones, like the body identical or bioidentical. All the research shows that particularly that bioidentical progesterone has lots of benefits and is the safest one to use. So I would steer clear from any of the synthetic progestins. Those have been linked with the increased risk of breast cancer and actually for brain health, the increased risk of dementia as well. So I would say, they're slowly being phased out anyway, but I would say, just making sure that you don't end up one of those. But, that might be really good for you to look at that as well. And then, you can, it is hard because there's so many.
No, but I think that's key, isn't it? What you said is, don't underestimate the power of changing your diet to something that's more healthy, cutting out sugar, eliminating or massively reducing alcohol. So you're not killing the good bugs in your gut, and creating dysbiosis. And addressing your stress levels is super important as well. Like you say, creating that time for yourself. And then when you've managed to do that, if that's your thing, if you want to do that, and it's not helping, then obviously reach out to someone like yourself, or a doctor that you trust, who can help explore your situation further and do some more detailed tests to understand what is lying at the root cause of the symptoms you're experiencing.
That's what I would say.
Sally, it has been, honestly, I've had so much fun talking about this. It's been an absolutely fascinating discussion, and I hope we can have many more of these as I go on my journey to learn more about nutrition. How can people find out more about what you do and all the products that you sell and so on? What's the best way for people to get hold of you?
So we've got a website, which I think is at the bottom, isn't it?
In the show notes as well.
So we have our website, which has got lots of information on and some resources. So there's some blogs I've written, which has got more information on women's health and herbs and nutrition. And we do have 15-minute discovery calls, which are free with our team. So if people want more information, you can book in for a discovery call, because that's the best way. You can kind of talk with the team, and then they'll share all the information about the different clinics and then if you're looking for the products, so we have the herbs that I use in my practice. I have developed a range of formulations of herbal teas and blends of the herbs. So we have like adaptogenic blend and some of the nervine herbs I've talked about, and they are organic and biodynamic herbs, and they're really beautiful quality herbs that we've used. So they're on the website as well. So you can just use those. They're really more for over the counter. I wanted to develop something that people could just use themselves, really. So they're things that you can just order and use yourself.
That is absolutely super. And if you want to go to a website, it's NCIFM UK.com. And that will all be posted in the show notes, along with all of the other websites and social media links. So Sally, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been such a great discussion.
Good. Lovely to meet you too.
And everybody, remember, this show is all about brain health, unchaining your pain. You're not stuck with the brain you have the power to make it better. And Dr. Sally Moorcroft has kindly been here to show us how. really hope you enjoyed that conversation. Thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to like and share this episode and leave a review on my website or on Apple Podcasts. If you're looking for opportunities to optimize your brain health or unchain your pain from a past trauma, make sure you visit my website www.ruthmaryallen.com and use the code podcast10 at checkout to get 10% off all programs. And always remember, you are not stuck with the brain you have. You have the power to make it better. You have the power to unchain your pain and optimize your brain power and performance so that you can win back energy and time doing what you love.